going and the recording. There we go. Now, if you're always, of course, I always post the screencast up there in the announcements, and I'll make sure I'm just checking that I'm not misleading anybody or maybe anyone is confused. You do understand now, for example, look at the announcements. This was February 28th, part 2, okay? And then I have I should have uploaded a part 2 for March 7th. No, this is the invitation. I apologize. Let me go down to the recordings themselves. Here's the part 2 for the 28th, which was last week. I apologize. And then you'll see the ground-based session part 1. So everybody's understanding that, right? Okay, good. And I apologize. One of the things about Canvas I don't like is I can't order these announcements. And I've tried to and talked to the folks across the street, and they don't know how to do it. So, well, it pays for what she gets. All righty, so we're ready to do it. Now, last week when we stopped, I think we'd stopped at either 11 or 12. Let me see what we got going on here. And then we'll get rolling. We cover 11. So this week we're going to cover 12. So if you would go over to the modules section, I want to do some quick housekeeping for us and make sure that we are ready to roll in terms of what we've got going on. Okay, now, of course, you can see we've got spring break coming up. I've got some flex time built in for you. This is module or week 5. And you should have uploaded Lunches Database 4 here. And I think I've got a Lunches Database, and I have a key here for you to upload for the workshop credit. Then the same thing for Lunches Database 5 and Lunches Database 6. And some resources for you there, but no exams. Let's pop over down to the 14th, okay, because this is, and we'll take a look at that and see what's ahead of us. And that's getting us, and right down there in 14, I don't have anything in here except some resources because the next week obviously is spring break. Now, I did include this for an important reason. First of all, the Code Academy, I really want to encourage you to go over there and take a look at Code Academy. I'm going to link to it. I'm going to tell you why. Just out of curiosity, I went over to see what are the kind of qualifications that people are asking for as a beginning financial analyst over on monster.com and some of the other job boards. And what I found was that they were wanting people who had background in finance. These are entry-level positions as an analyst. Not only that, but they wanted people who could code in Python and who could work in R. So, as I might have mentioned, maybe I mentioned in this class, what's coming towards us in the United States and the rest of Europe is this thing called fintech. And this is a development that's occurred over in Asia, particularly in China, because folks over there, especially in that country, don't trust their banking system. So they use apps, and if you've heard of blockchain technology is basically an algorithm that can only be solved by the receiver of a transaction. I send you $1,000 and the blockchain is an encryption. There's a third party who's certified that everybody agrees on, who kind of referees things and makes sure that if you can't open it up, even though you're supposed to have the key, they go back and check. What this does is this eliminates intermediaries like banks. And so folks took a big shine to this technology because other than that, previous to that, if you were making money in China as they started to get into do a little bit of capitalism, you hid your money in the ground in the backyard. You hid your money. You hid your money. You tried to maybe put it in overseas accounts or something like that because you were afraid, and most people still remain afraid, that they put their money in the Chinese banks, the government will just take the money. And you never know. They are a communist country. They are run by a small group of people They've decided to use capitalism to fund their stuff. So you just don't know if you have money in an account, if it'll be there the next day. And so we have this whole wave of things that are coming. If you use a banking app, which probably some of you do, if you purchase stuff online, like through PayPal, people like that, the first thing that's going to happen is going to be the removal of the intermediaries. And databases play a big part in this. Now, maybe some of you have heard about Bitcoin and cyber coins and so forth. I don't believe that those are going to really make much of a dent, because the people in this culture are used to using fiat currency. And now, of course, we do transactions electronically. So, the ATMs, when you have grandkids, your grandkids will look at ATMs like you look at phone booths, whoever used one of those. So that's one of those changes occurring. And when you look at your phone, you take your phone out tonight, here's what your phone is, what you have there. You have an icon for your app. You have a link from that icon to a server, and the server has a table and it has a database connected for you. That's really what an application, that's really all they are. If you use Spotify or any music service like that, what they'll do is, if you're one of these, now I can't stand, I pay for the premium so I can get the music list that I want. But if you're like my wife and you're cheap, she'll play a song and then you can play another song. I think you get like 6 skips or something before they take it from you. And she'll go hours to find 5 songs. I go, just pay the $10 a month. That's me. Okay. Anybody here use Spotify, or am I so behind the times? Okay, I'm up. Okay, so I like it because it's a good service. Now, the best service I ever had was long ago, and it was a file sharing service. And the whole idea was I uploaded a file, music file, and then we all kind of shared. And Napster was its name. I don't think you ever even heard Napster. Must have probably even born. But the whole idea was we share music files, and the people that create the music companies and the artists got angry and sued Napster and shut them down, because they said, a person uploads one file and then downloads 10,000. There's kind of an issue going on. All right. So away we go. So let's take a look over at chapter 12, and that's going to be over at page 435 in the textbook. So pop over there if you would. If you did bring your textbook, God bless you. Thank you very much. Now, we're going to go into the file here. Let me get this jewel out of the way. And we have the access code for the SQL. Okay, and I'm going to open it up. All right, and I want to open for chapter 12. And here, as I said, we're going to control the level of summarization. Now, we did row functions. We've done row functions. Now we're doing column functions. And as I said before, what's happening is, as we have these row functions, so we can use total things that are on the rows, we're using these column functions, which are aggregate, which will let us do counts and other kinds of operations. And now we're starting to link up the rows in the table, the rows in the columns. And then once we link up the tables, we start to build that analytical cube that I've got an illustration over there for you, where we start to slice and dice, and we leverage the law of large numbers. Yes, anybody have a question? Okay. Now, this is extremely important for a very simple reason. The average person who leaves a company takes with them, in an average company, $25,000 worth of knowledge. If they work in a knowledge-intensive firm like this place is, or a pharmaceutical company, medical facility, software company, folks that make weapon systems, folks that manufacture things using, well, who doesn't today manufacture things using automated systems? Those people, when they leave and they walk out, have about 200 grand of knowledge in their head. So that knowledge is exceptionally important and it's exceptionally valuable. So we try to capture as much of it as we can in tables and try to slice and dice it as much as we can so we can get the maximum value from it. And what we look for are patterns that should be there, that should be familiar. Those would be what we would call a discipline query. And then on occasions, we look for those things that are anomaly that we wouldn't expect to find. Now, we also have our little data warehouse. I'm going to close that off. And that's my good friend over here, the SQL fund. So let me see if I can find that. And I should have one over here somewhere. There's one. This is my data warehouse, and I'm going to copy it and paste it. I'm going to call this LD12. So I want to rename it. You notice I'm using the same database over and over and over. Why? I have the basic tables loaded in there, and I can run queries to change those tables. In addition to that, I can use the queries to harvest data from the tables. Now, one final thing that's important to understand. Data is worthless if we can't attach a meaning to it. And when we can attach meaning to it, we have information. If I were to tell you, well, the gross revenues of OBU in 2013 were $68 million. You have a data point. I don't know what it means because you have to do what? Compare it in some way or the other or put it in context. So that's where your experience in an industry, that's where your ability to go and maybe get other data sets or take that same set of data and visualize it or break it down, that's when it can start to have meaning. It can have meaning if I have that one data point, but I say I have that 68 million gross, here's what we spent to recruit students, here's what we spent for faculty, here's if we had a positive, neutral, or net positive, negative, or net revenue. I was completely astounded when I sat in a meeting the other day and I heard someone who I have no idea. They were in this, and you think I'm old, that person, I thought they were probably going to drop dead at any minute, and began to tell us about net positive revenue, negative revenue, and neutral revenue. I'm thinking, like they had just discovered the concept, and I'm going, whoa. Okay, so if you think I'm decrepit, okay, I've got some I look at and I go, welcome. Are you there? Now, should we call for the embalming fluid yet or what? Okay. And look, listen, here's the deal. Let's say I drop dead tonight in class. I'm at the top of the actuarial table. It can happen. You have my permission to hoist my body above your heads, just like a wild animal you'd slain in Africa, and carry me down to the rotunda and place me in the middle down there. Because they have instructions to come and put me in a glass case and there will be a celebration for a week. I'll lie in state just like Joseph Stalin. Or like Kim Jong-un's father. I love that when they have the open casket deal and people walk by and they're crying and stuff. Pretty cool. I wish I'd come in there for his funeral. His father's funeral. If they'd paid me 50 grand, I would have been one of the most saddest, remorseful, and tearful people I've ever met. Now, would I have left North Korea with the 50 grand? That's another question. Who knows? So we've got some queries we're going to look at, and we're going to work on chapter 12. So let's look at the very first one. And again, they give us a nice little schematic over there on page 37 about summarizing groups of data within a column. And you'll notice that we've got the table there, beginning table, and then we get a result table where we have two pieces, the group identity and then summarize data for each group. That's when we're doing subgroupings or what we might call subtotals. Okay? let's look at this very first one, 12.2. And this ought to make some kind of sense to us. It's not that big of a deal, okay? And I'm going to select the manager ID. So far, so good. You go, this is starting to get boring. It should, because the repetition will start to kick in. Count, and that's the employee ID as the number, and we're using column alias there. Then the minimum, another column alias, maximum, another column alias from the employee table. Now we're going to put in some qualifiers. Where not, so we're going to filter out all the employees ID equals 202. And then we're going to group them by the manager's ID and then order them by the manager ID. You see that? One of the reasons I want you to have your book is important. Look at page 439 if you've got your book. You'll see that you'll look at the beginning table, okay? That's our start. That's what we're pulling from. That's the employee table. Then you'll see the first shot where the clause is applied, and anybody who has an ID of employee ID of 202, they're taken out. And if you go over to page 440, you're going to see and they walk us through this where the rows of the table are divided into groups. Okay, and they're divided there, and they're grouped by the manager ID and then ordered by the manager ID, and then we see the results set. Okay. You'll notice we're going through a process of where we're extracting data. We're just pulling it out as we go. Okay, let's go ahead and we'll copy all of that. And we're going to go over here and we're going to click Create. And I want to go to the Query Design view. We're going to have the SQL view. Boom. And we'll run this query. One of the things I like to do, you see the run, everybody see the run icon? Is to say, run, Forrest, run. Anybody know what movie that's from? Forrest Gump, okay. Does anybody know where Forrest came from? And can you say it like Forrest said it? Where did he believe Jenny should have gone back to after they had the dramatic encounter at the wading pool in front of Abraham Lincoln's memorial? You remember what he said? Greenbow, Alabama. Greenbow, Alabama. And them good people. How many of you seen Forrest Gump? Once? Twice? Maybe a dozen times? 2 or 3 dozen? Obsessed? I like the t-shirt. You remember that one? The t-shirt? But what can I say? I'm obsessed with Forrest Gump. I watch every chance I get. There's a lot of wisdom there. Anyway, we've got the manager ID. We've got the number of employees. And I like Lieutenant Dan because Lieutenant Dan does nice stuff. Good guy. Gary Sneese, he's okie dokie. Question? You met him? Oh, I am not worthy. Where did you meet him at? Oh, he's a good man. Did his band play there, or was he just showing up, doing the band thing? Good people. He's all right. I am not worthy. Gary Sneese is cool. Good man. Good man. All right. So we've got our results set, and notice what we've done. We've taken and we've worked through, the text walked us through how we winnowed all that down to get what we were after. Now here's the nice thing. If we do extractive work at any other kind with any other kind of entity or material or anything like that, we end up with stuff left over. When somebody carves a wood pipe or they carve something, there's always going to be material left over. You may or may not be able to use the material. When we refine oil or refine other products, there's always some leftovers. There's always polymers. There's always stuff left over. Quick story that helped me learn a lot about the value of databases. I started my career. I was down at Southeast Missouri State, Missouri, in the great city of Cape Girardeau, Missouri. Anybody ever down there in Cape Girardeau? Down in the Boot Heel, Missouri. Right down there. Some fine towns down there. Sikeston, Jackson, right there on the Mississippi River. We had a program there where faculty in the College of Science would go and work with one of the local plastics company, and the folks who worked, the scientists over there, would come over and teach classes. And then they would do joint things together. It was something the state of Missouri had encouraged. And then they wanted us at the business school to get involved. So we said, all right. So we over met and with the folks, and they had a polymer lab where they would conduct what they call destructive and non-destructive testing. And they would test the stuff for its tensile strength and all this, and then they would send the results out to whatever manufacturer or chemical company or whatever had sent it to them. Okay? Well, every time they'd run one of those tests, they'd have some stuff left over. And one day, the guy who was the vice president of sales said to me, I'm just wondering, do you think anybody would be interested in the compositional attributes of the stuff that's left over? And I said, I have no idea. I don't know your industry, but maybe so. He said, well, I'd like to catalog it. And so he began to catalog it. He came to me and said, is there any way I can keep this in a better form? And I said, well, we were just starting to see personal computers at that time. And I said, well, I think we could try to kind of rig you up a database. We had a couple of database clients there at the school. And so we took his data in, inputted the data. I guess maybe 6 months, a year later, he calls and says, we need to come over and visit with you and visit with the president of the university. So I'll go, and the dean, the president, our old faculty. We're sitting around, and the owner of the company said, I have a firm that wants to purchase my company. And he said, would you come in and do an evaluation of our company for me? And it was privately held. And he said, because it's privately held, it's going to be very difficult. If you have a publicly held firm, that's pretty easy. Privately, that's a private firm, it's different. Well, I said, okay, we'll come and try to do an evaluation on it and see what we can come up with as a figure that would be fair for the purchaser and for you. Well, we came up with our best shot. Took us about a month, maybe 6 weeks. And we took our data over to the company owner. And let me stop for a moment and tell you how extraordinary it is to have a university and a company in town work so closely together. This just doesn't happen all the time. Maybe out in Silicon Valley or places like that, but in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. But that was because we had a president at the university who's is an extremely far forward thinking person. And when he started the program of the scientists coming over and our faculty going over and working in their labs, literally working for them and us and them teaching for us, it was an incredible experience for the chemistry students. And they started saying, hey, we want more of this. Well, to make a long story short, we went over and had a lunch, blah, 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 and we presented the figures. Okay? And he had a big smile on his face. And we said, well, what's wrong? Did we do something wrong? Are the figures? And I thought, oh, we're naive, or we messed up, the math's wrong. And the dean was there and his face was turning red. And he said, no. He said, your valuation, he said, let me ask you a question. Do you think your valuation is high or low? I said, we think it's high, but we thought you can always negotiate if they want to talk you down. And he started laughing. And he said, well, your figure's about 40 or 50% less than what they've offered me. You could have heard a pin drop. And I could hear the president's mind going, I'm going to get a big donation from us. I'm going to get a big donation for us. I'm going to build a new building for us. And I could hear the dean going, I'm going to get some endowed professors for us. I'm going to get some endowed professors for us. I could hear it. And we all took a deep breath. He said, yeah. And he said, what would you advise? And I was still a new faculty member. I was young and dumb, so I said, take it. Take the money and run, my friend. And I got a little bit chewed on a little bit later when I was told I forgot to remind them of who had done the evaluation for them and helped them. Well, over the next couple of weeks, they'd kind of keep us in track of what's going on, what's happening. I kept thinking, what is the story here? And finally, one day, that vice president for marketing that I'd worked with a little bit with called me and said, I want you to come over. I want to talk to you for a second. I said, okay. So I went over and we sat down. And he said, now, I want you to keep this under your hat. I said, okay. We're going to send all of the faculty in your college and the dean and the president of the university to the Super Bowl, free, on us. I'm going. I said, listen, the way protocol works here, you need to go tell the big cheese first, not me. I'm just small fry. And I said, I'm just interested. I'm curious. What was it that drove the price? What was it was the value driver for them to offer you that kind of money? And he said, simple. He said, it was our database. They were very interested in that database we'd collected as we had done those testing on those polymers and the residues that were left. And they really wanted to keep doing that because they were starting to find some materials or potential composites that they could use to produce some new product, to make some new products. And he said, look around you. And I looked around at the plant. He said, do you think all this is worth that much money? And I said, he said, no, you're not going to insult us. Yeah, it's an old plant. Oh, but that's what so they wanted the intellectual property. And if we hadn't had the database to collect that intellectual property, they wouldn't have made that big sellout. Now, here's one of the sad things I learned about working in a bureaucracy. The next day, the president called us all in. He said, I want you to know I'm extremely proud. I'm already getting my sunglasses and my tanning oil and getting myself ready to go up and go see the Super Bowl. I'm going to the Super Bowl. And the president said, I want you to know how proud I am of you. The firm has decided to make a substantial gift to our library, which is about the same amount of money it would have taken to send us all to the Super Bowl. So the library got a whole bunch of money, and we went nowhere. Sad story, isn't it? I learned, never trust the people above you. Never, never, never. Anyway, that's the end of that deal. So we've run that first query there in 12.2, and now we're going to do some more work. And I want you to pop over to page 442 because we're going to work on 12.3. Now, listen, I tell some stories, but you got to admit that's kind of interesting, and there's always some good insights in them, and those war stories are helpful. So we're going to do another, and I don't even know if we need to run this one. Let's just talk about it real quickly. This is 12.4. Okay, here we're going to select, in this 12.4, we're going to select data from some columns. We're going to get a count, and then we're going to count everything in the columns there. That's what that asterisk is. Then we're going to count column 4, count column 5, and then we're going to group them. So let's copy this, okay, real quickly, and we'll go ahead and run it anyway. I want to click Create. Query design. One of these days, if you're nice, I'll tell you the story of the days when I was a dean and I took my faculty, it was a school up in Chicago, and I took my faculty, all of my faculty, to dinner at Michael Jordan's. Boy, when I turned in my expense report, that was a barn burner. I'm proud of that too. Stood my ground. Yeah, I was dean for another year, but hey, I had my fun. I was never cut out to be an administrator anyway. Okay, now the only problem we've got with query number, with this query here, the first one is we're going to call it 12.2. Let's go ahead and save it as 12.2. Okay. The second one is 12.4. But the only way we would improve it would be if we were to take those expressions and rename them as something meaningful. And that's about, that would be about really probably the only way. And if you look over there at the bottom of page 445, you're going to see where the authors utilized aliases, and they're just showing us the blank code there, and that's why you get those expressions. But they used aliases to get, you know, PK primary key 1, column 2, column 3, column 4, 5. So we would just go ahead and put some aliases in there to make it look a little prettier. And over on 446, he walks you through he shows you that where they've got those null data, the null data, excuse me, and then works you, and then at the bottom, he shows you what's not going to be happening there. And if you want to, I think I've made some notes there that the column 1, the expression 1003 is, I think, would be count would be the expression, yeah, well, expression 102, 1003 would be column 4, and expression would be column 5. You have to be careful, as I mentioned last week, when you use, for example, at the top of 446, when you use things like count and count, you got to be awfully careful because you'll get some glitchiness because you're using some functional words. Let's take a look at page 451, and we're going to run 12.6. Okay. Now, here in 451, he gives us the task: show a technique to deal with the error. And there's an error in an SQL code in an earlier query, and adds more columns to the group by clause. And then he says if it's highlighted, it changes changes the code. So let's look at this and let's run it. Now it's one of these little before after things, but I want to stop when we get finished for a second and talk about it just a hair. We've got query by design, and we'll run. Now, let's go into and we'll say this is 12.6. Now let's go into the design view, because normally we don't go in there in this course too much, but that's where you worked when we did 11.23 and where you'll do a lot of work, of course. And we've got the table that we're using, and you'll notice we're going to group the employees field and put that in ascending order. Now, you really didn't need to put it in ascending order for the simple reason that ascending order is by default. That's the default order for any database. It's ascending. But you'll notice over there he's got several notes for you in 12.6. Okay? And he highlights some of the changes to the code. That's the first name. And then the last name, and you'll see all the little notes that he has over there on 1 and 2, okay? And we've added these to those columns. So sometimes when we work with these when we do these aggregate data, we have to rename columns or use column aliases because they'll show up as expressions. We hit some of the same thing when we were dealing and working with rows. Okay. All righty. I want to tell you something. I do appreciate you folks being out here. I know it's late. I know you're tired. And I appreciate your hard work. Okay, we got, yeah. I want you to notice something also. If you'll take a look at that result set for 12.6, take a look at the first two rows and notice that we have the null data. Now, if we had wanted to, and I'm going to go back down to the SQL view, we could have gone ahead and used the NZ function, and that is no, we have no nulls. But in this case, we're working with the kinds of attributes that we will try to live with the nulls if we have to. But again, and we could probably infer these are probably supervisors. There's something special about these employees, or the data just simply weren't entered. I'll get the manager ID. And if they're both, if they're lacking a manager ID because they're a manager, then the question in my mind would be is, okay, why do they not have a maximum credit limit attached to them? Again, those kinds of little anomalies, if you've got to ask those kinds of questions, you've got some issues going on. Now, take a look over at page 453, and we're going to do 12.7. Okay? And we're going to do the statement for the summarized data. That's in the middle of page 453, excuse me. But it's going to be this 12.7.1 for summarized data. And let's grab this. Well, I want you to add the following. And watch what I'm going to do here. And I'm going to put up a bracket. And what else did I do? Max credit limit. Okay, yeah, bracket. Now, when I invoke a bracket, okay, and make sure it's a bracket, then I can be pretty free-form in terms of how I name a column or a dimension. So here I've got this inside the column, and so I'm going to get max credit, and I'll get max credit limit there. And I'm going to go to the data sheet view. Oh, you say you need to click create. Yikes. Sorry, folks. Got ahead of myself. I got excited about showing you that coding we had to do there, a little workaround. There we go. I've got the manager ID, credit limit. The brackets let me create an alias and be, again, free form and not have to worry so much about being completely strict in terms of connecting all the characters. And the reason you'll see the underscores is when you write a name for a dimension, it has to have it can't have blank characters. So now, if I put them inside of a bracket, I'm good, because the bracket says that I'm doing a free form thing here. So interpret this as what we would call variable characters, just like if we were putting the data into a table, and we're good to go here. That's all that's going on. So let's say that is 12.8. And we're good. Anybody have a question? I'll stop for a sec. Yes. I'm sorry, it's 12.8. You're right. Thank you. 12.7. I hadn't seen in a long time last night. Speaking of thank you, I'm going to close this and then rename it. So close it, rename it as 12.7. What was it? So I forget now. But we've got all the objects I want, just the queries. And so that's going to, it's 12.7 instead of 12.8. So we'll rename it. There we go. And then we get the summarized data. Now, at the top of 454, they show us a second statement for this if we want the detailed data. Okay? And that's, we're going to select those fields from the employee table and then just lay them out there. Now, if you take a look at the bottom of page 454 for just a moment, okay, you're going to see a little question there about creating a grand total, and they tell you you have to run two queries there. The first is you're going to select everything from that section 1202 table, okay, and then the second one you're going to select the sum from column 3. They want to get the column 3 as the grand total from that table. That's a lot of work when you could just take the stuff and dump it into Excel if you have to, if you wanted to, and just simply run the auto sum. But it's one of these situations where you're doing some work that it's maybe a little bit beyond what you ought to be doing with Access, and probably ought to be over working in Excel. You'll run into the opposite version of situations as well. Over page 456, we got 12.9, and let's look at it for just a moment. So we'll come down here, and I shouldn't have to run this, because if I were to ask you what function am I using, what function am I using here? Can you tell me in this query? What function am I using? The count, exactly. I'm using the count function. As I take a look, there's the employee ID, and I'm going to count. There's another device I'm using. I'm using an alias. Can somebody tell me where the alias is at? When I say as number of lunches, okay? So we're just saying, give it an alias, and the alias is the number of lunches. And then, are we going to do any work with these in terms of ordering or grouping them? Yes or no? Yeah. Now you'd say, why would I group these and then order them? And that's the $64 question of the week, is why would you group them and then why would you order them? What do you think? Why would I order them, and why would I group them and then order them?
Easier, easily accessible.
Okay, yeah, that's one thing. That's the end result. When I group something, think of it like this. When I group something, I'm pulling together a set of things that have a common element, okay? When I group data, I'm essentially putting a frame around them. Then if I order them, I'm putting them in an order within that frame. You follow me? It's like I'm putting a frame around them, and then I'm looking down into the frame. Do I want to see the last stuff first or the first stuff left? How do I want that to go? So your answer was correct, okay? And so we typically will want to group everything so that we get the subtotal effect, and then we'll order them. This would be like me saying, okay, give me the sales for store number 85 for the month of November. I've just grouped the data. Tell me the highest selling item. Now I've done what? I've ordered the data. You got me? That's a drill down technique. I could just as easily say, well, when I'm saying order by employee ID, I'm basically saying I want this in ascending order. If I wanted to put it in descending order, that's a different critter. And I'd use the descending order, I use the descending function to get that done. But it's by default, I'm putting them in ascending order. See, almost remember when I talked about the data cube, if you think about this, you'll kind of see that as I'm peering down, I'm peering down that data, and it's almost like I'm looking down a shaft of a well or the shaft of a mine, and I see a frame, and I have another frame. Okay. They got some exciting things there like counting to zero. That's 1210. Let's do that. I'll bet you've never done this in your life, but why not? Let's live. And we'll click create, and we'll do the query design. Get out of there. I'll go to the SQL view. And I'm going to run it. I've got the employee ID, the first name, last name, and then the number of something, number of lunches. Now, this is one of these examples where if I chose to, I could go into the design view and I could order them, or I could group them and order them how I wanted to. If I have 1,000 of these or 1,900 of these, 2,000, 3,000, I'm going to throw them into Excel and deal with them using a filter or do a custom sort. How many of you took 1123 with me? Business problem analysis. Anybody? You count yourself fortunate because those were the old days. The new days are, we had a case today where we had to sort and filter. We had to sort and then filter 2,000 records. That's a lot of records. And we were using the sum if function and doing that. And then once we created the sum if function, we were doing some drill downs, and we put them into a custom sort, and then we used the filters to get data out. That was great fun. And as you've heard me say before, it's one thing to mess around with 20 cases or 20 records or something. It's another thing when it's a couple of thousand, and it's really something else when it's 10,000 or 50,000. And they got that feeling of, whew, it's a lot of records I'm dealing with. So if we look here, let's go into the design view for just a sec, and you'll see what I'm talking about. We've got the employee ID, okay? We're going to group them in ascending order. Then we're going to group by the first name, then group by the last name, and then we're going to count the number of lunches. Now, it's important to understand something, that when in Access, as I go left to right, the operations that occur in terms of those dimensions, they occur left to right. So the first thing it does is it groups them, the employee ID. The next thing the machine will do is it's gonna group them by first name. The third thing it'll do, it'll group them by a last name, okay? And the last thing it'll do is it's gonna count the number of lunches they have. And it will proceed left to right. Now, it does it so fast that we don't really see it, which is a good point to good time to kind of talk about, our perceptions. Our perceptions can really fool us. Anybody know how fast we're traveling right now? How fast does the Earth travel as it rotates? You can look it up. You got the world's greatest database in front of you. If I'm not mistaken, we're traveling about, I think, 25,000 miles an hour. My brain says 17,000 or 26,000. We're going so fast we don't know it. Time is like that. In the blink of an eye, you'll be just like me. Wrinkles, hair falling out, gray hair. You look in the bathroom mirror and you're scared because you don't know who's in there with you. Like that. I was a student here a long time ago. Boom, here I am. Life goes fast. Time is one of those things. Use your time wisely and understand, you make decisions here that could impact eternity. How many of you have ever heard of Pascal's wager? Anybody? Never heard about Pascal's wager? You have?
It sounds familiar.
Okay. Y'all go to chapel, right? You get a browbeating from a preacher or somebody tells you you're bad people. Did they tell you you're bad people or going to hell yet? Or have they quit preaching about hell? They don't like to say it because it upsets people. But they tell you it should be nice, right? Pascal's wager, you've heard it. It's a very simple one. Pascal was a mathematician, and he was questioning about whether or not he should become a Christian. And Pascal said, well, let me look at it like this. If I choose to be a Christian and I die and I've foregone some earthly pleasures or made some sacrifices and I wake up and I'm in heaven, it's a lot longer time I'm going to spend in heaven than I will here. But if I choose not to, I've made a bad choice because for some short-term pleasure, I will experience long-time pain in the form of separation from God. Now, I understand about the fire airs and all that stuff and getting prodded by demons and all that business. The worst thing about hell is that you'll be separated from God's love, which means in hell, people are separated from anything good, anything happy, anything pleasurable. God's the author of all of that. If you don't believe me, go look up what the book of James has to say. Yes, I've read my Bible. I don't live like it or act like it, but I've read it. I feel so good about this right now, I think I'd take up an offering. What do you think? Look, one of my old pastors used to say, now, folks, it didn't cost you nothing to come in today, but it's going to cost you something to get out. So, gentlemen, dig down in them pants. Ladies, get down in that purse. Let's put some money on that plate. How many of you grew up Baptist? Only a few of us? Okay, I know the rest of you must be lost. I'm teasing. I am lost. I thought I was going to Texas A&M. How am I here? I understand. That's a different kind of lost. I'm playing. I'm just playing. How many of you went to Falls Creek? Oh, yeah, Falls Creek. Did you like Falls Creek? Okay. Did they have air conditioning there when y'all went? Oh, man. There ain't nothing. There's nothing like Falls Creek. When I went, it was a church service, and there was no air. And we didn't stop having an invitation until somebody passed out or somebody came forward. So my friends would say, we've got to go home and get some sleep sometime. So I've probably rededicated my life at Falls Creek more times than anybody. I was always afraid I might sign one of them things that say, yes, I'll go and be a missionary. I was always careful about that. My mother said, you rededicate your life a lot. What's wrong with you? And then she said, forget that. We know. That was just to get out of it. Well, we've done query 1210 there, so we'll call that. I'll try to give you some anecdotes. But seriously, I was a person who grew up, accepted the Lord at an early age, grew up in the church, etc. And then when I left and went off to school, I had to have what we call an intellectual conversion. And my intellectual conversion hit me one day when it was this. When I read when the Apostle Paul talked about the resurrection sightings of Jesus. Now, this is not something like, like you see on Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Anybody see that movie? Never? Oh my goodness, you gotta see it. It wasn't like Jesus peeked in and said, hey y'all, I'm alive and I will see you in a few thousand years. Take care, God bless. That was the Matthew McConaughey Jesus. Now, God bless y'all. Blessed are the poor. You will get an MKZ Lincoln in your next life. Paul says he was seen by one person, two people, his disciples, that's 12, because they had appointed a new person. He was seen by as many as 500 people at one time. They had a Jesus is Risen assembly in Jerusalem, and people didn't come out because they didn't believe it. 500 people. He was here for 40 days and 40 nights. He went fishing. Well, he got some fish and had breakfast down at Cracker Barrel with the disciples. Cracker Barrel there on the Dead Sea. They did a little fishing. Hung around, taught him some stuff. The book of Acts says, so that doesn't sound like somebody who was dead and didn't come back from the dead. He did. And so when I read that, I said to myself, the probabilities, if I compute these as independent events or dependent events, either way, the probability that this is all a lie is so low that I'm a fool if I don't believe. So I said, okay, my brain's converted. What do you think? Now, this is one of the ways I integrate faith with learning. Another way I integrate faith with learning is I reenact his first miracle, a wedding party, making wine. Hey, what do you think? Oh, where do I get the water, Dr. Harmon? I'm bringing a jug now. Isn't it interesting that our Lord's first public miracle was to make wine at a wedding party? What does that tell you about him? He's not been portrayed like we want him to. Now, he'd give us some warnings, and every now and then he'd drop the hammer. But our Lord wants us to have a good life, to enjoy life, to have fun. He wants us to enjoy our lives, to be confident that he's there, and that no matter what happens, those who love him and are called according to his purpose, what? He will do what? I want to go find that, Romans 8:28 through 38. It's good stuff. I'll tell you what, how many of you know I used to be a faith healer? You didn't know that? Oh, I never was. That's a lie. That's a lie. So I've integrated faith with learning. You can check that off when you do my evaluation. Okay? Thank you. Thank you very much. God bless. All righty. We've done 12-2, but I make fun about that, but it's very true. All righty. 12-11. We're going to look at the having clause, and that's at the bottom of page 460. And so we're going to ramp up our code here. Now, my late older brother was a minister. My younger brother is a bivocational minister. He's a youth pastor, and he also works at the Supermax prison in Florence, Arizona, the one that's been on Discovery Channel with the worst people out there. He's a better man. He's a better man than I am. He has worked there for a long time, about 25 years, and he started out where he would walk with one person out in the yard where they did their exercise, and he couldn't have anything that could be tied or anything of that sort because if you have someone crazy and they're in there for good, they might take a set of shoestrings and choke you to death. What do they got to lose? So he worked his way up. I remember when he worked the tower. Anybody know what do you think the tower was in a prison? Anybody have an idea? It's that place, with the spotlight. He asked his supervisor, he said, okay, what's the number one thing I need to know? And his supervisor said something very interesting. Save the taxpayers of Arizona as much money as you possibly can. Think about that. I asked him, I said, what did you learn in all those 25 years you've worked with those people? He said, yeah, I've learned one thing. They are all innocent. You believe that? All right. Now, this query, we ran 1211, okay? And let's take a look at this, Jewel. And I'm going to run it. Boom. And here we are. Now, I'm going to go back down and look at now I'm going to select the supplier ID, then I'm going to get the product code. I'm going to sum. So I'm going to use the sum function. The quantity is total serving. So I use the sum. I use the function, the sum, and then I use the column alias. And that's from the lunch items. And I group those, okay? And then I use the halving clause, where I had the sum where the quantity is greater than 10, and I ordered them by the supplier ID and the product code. You see that? Now, once you see this, you should be very happy about yourself. You know more structured query language than 90% of the people on planet Earth. You truly do. You are an exclusive group of people. You don't know that, but you are. You are an exclusive group of people who are enrolled in going to college on planet Earth. Of all the people, 7 billion, many of them would do anything to be in your seats or be doing what I do for a living. We had a student here who's about, maybe 8, 9 years ago, long before you guys got here. He played basketball for us. And he grew up in Bosnia and lived through the civil war there in Bosnia. And I remember him telling us. About when he'd go to high school, he had to carry a weapon, and there was a particular route there were 3 routes he could follow, and he had to change them up because if he went the wrong route, he'd get shot by a sniper. And several of his friends got terminated by a sniper. And his dream was to get to the United States. And so he was about 7'2". So he came and played basketball. He was on our championship team, I think in 2009, 2010. Mirko. Played basketball. But I remember him talking about the experience of living in that. And you'd be sitting in your living room and then you'd hear a distant boom, and they'd be shelling your city. As a child, he lived through all that bloodbath. We are so fortunate. Very, very, very fortunate. Okay, so we've looked at that. Now we can see that. And we're good to go. All right. Now, starting over on page 464, the author begins to walk us through one of these multi-process kinds of things. And this is where he starts. We enter select statement, and then we go and we run a query, and we get this total savings, okay? And then we save that query as 1214 view. All right. The second step is we run a query on that view, and we put in a qualifier where the servings are greater than or equal to 10. So if you're following along on page 464 and then 465, you'll see that, and they'll show you the result sets for each one. I don't think it's necessary because we've done this several times, but what we've done is we've created a view. Okay? You say, well, why would you call it a view? Just call it whatever. We call it a view for a simple reason. One, that's what it is technically. And number two, we're signaling or telegraphing in the title that I'm going to do a secondary operation. Okay? So I run this first operation, I query, then I run a second one. So I've extracted a little more data, I've cut it a little finer. And fine-tuning things are important. Have I ever told you folks the most interesting but perhaps dangerous job at the Anheuser-Busch Brewery in St. Louis, Missouri? I'll tell you about that. What would you think it is? Anyone want to guess? How many of you have ever gone on a tour of a brewery? Do not raise your hand. Oh, okay. I lived in St. Louis for 20 years. You had to go through the brewery. I went through a tour just to make sure I didn't miss anything. I went, maybe 2 or 3 dozen times, but hey. But I had a good friend of mine. His dad owned the distributorship here in the state of Oklahoma for AB, and so we went up for a tour, and we got to see them in a daily work thing, and they push that liquid through these gigantic vats, and they have a person who they would lower them down on a rope, and everything was lint free, and this person had gloves. They were in this suit. It was like a hazmat suit, but it was all lint free, and they took that and they had a wand, and they wiped that vat, the inside of it. And they do it so that they reduce the amount of friction or drag as they push that liquid through. They push so much liquid through that if they don't reduce the drag to an absolute minimum, it can cost them that much more money in electricity to push the stuff through. That's how much the volumes of liquid that they push through, and I'm sure they've expanded. Speaking of databases, I said to Mike one time, I said, you know what would really be funny is, I said, what's that? I said, I'd like to go and with the brewery guys and see how they do quality control. And I said, okay, now listen, first of all, I am not pushing drinking beer by any, so don't hear that. I'm talking though about how they handle their product and their passion for quality. And so there's a couple of guys, and we rode in the back of the car, walked in, they went into the cooler, and they pulled the date and time stamps. And if they found anything that was out of date and time, they took it off the shelf, they put it in a box, and when they got through, they drove back to the office and took the box and put it on that distributor owner's table and said, this is the junk we picked up today. They were passionate about that. They take a picture of what they call a side row, like a 6-pack, you have 3, and an end row. And if you didn't see that Budweiser label, on every single one, they took a picture and put the picture on the owner's desk and said, this is how you market your product. They were passionate about that. And I thought, whew, that's why they were the #1 selling beer for, I guess they probably still are. I know a lot of craft beers and people like that are out there, but boy, I thought these people are serious about the quality of their product and the quality of and the way it's presented. And if there was a can that looked like it was dirty, I won't name this chain, but it was a very popular convenience store that has 2 digits in it. that has what people like to get those when they throw dice. I'll say no more. But it was the filthiest place I'd ever seen. It was filthy. And we walked in, and the cans, the side row, they had end rows, and those end rows were not sparkling clean. And they called in to find out whose route it was, and had the driver come out and wash the window for that row, come from wherever they were, and that end and the two cans. They were serious about quality. Woo. Precision, precision, precision. One of those business lessons you learn. I learned one from my dad. I decided I wanted to be a produce manager, and so I worked the lettuce section. He had a huge produce in one of his stores, largest store, and I wanted to run the lettuce area. Why, I don't know. Stupid. And so I did, and I wasn't careful about the quality of things, and my dad started looking, and about every third one, he'd go on the ground, on the ground, because it didn't meet his standards. It had browning on it or something like that. And he said, would you take that home and eat it? Would you serve it in a restaurant? Then why are you here doing this? Everybody's going, that's a boss's son. It's pretty rough on him. And he was. When I worked for my dad, he probably fired me 3 dozen times. But when I was a teenager, I said, I can make more money at Pizza Hut than working for you. He'd go, well, okay, I'll keep you here. I never got a raise. That was the thing I kept saying. When's he going to go, well, I'll pay what Pizza Hut does? He never did. I thought, well, this is stupid. But I learned some lessons. Well, let's look at 12.5. And 12.5, they as he tells us here, and you can see, we get the same result more efficiently by using a where clause instead of doing this machination with all these different views, all this. We just select the manager ID, the count, and then we use the where the manager is between 201, 203. We group. And so we use that where clause. It's just a more efficient way to get to the data. Now, we're coming down to a point where I want to kind of stop. Hold your pause. They're over on page 468, 469. They talk about creating a view using one column function. Okay? It's a highly specialized view, and really what we're doing is, you'll notice the one column there is quantity, and we're going to sum that quantity. And that's all we're doing. So is that a good use of coding time? I don't know if that's really all you're after, fine. But you're doing a little bit of work. I guess because you're talking about the quantity, that would be fine. I guess I would probably want to go ahead and do another function. So let's do that for just a second. And we're going to all right. It's like the supplier ID, the product code, and okay. Let me just make this point. On page 469, that access code, I could have some, and I could come in under that, and I could put average quantity as average quantity. and we can invoke the average function because we've got the sum function there. Now I'm going to stop here for a very simple reason. We're going to be able to embark over on chapter 13. And chapter 13 is where we start to kind of zoom back out and go to and start to take these row and column functions and really take them to town, because now in chapter 13 we're going to start to learn about adding tables, okay, and using table aliases. This is where we start to leverage the law of large numbers to get these to get the data and then carve it down, but we have to have enough data there to get that profile or to go after the anomaly that we're after or whatever. It's just simply a matter of throwing a big net. And chapter 13 starts us on that process of working with inner joins. So I want to stop here. I do appreciate your patience and your being here. I know you're tired, etc. And so this last one, let's call that, what would be good? Let's save that as 12 dash enough. Okay? You've had enough. I'm going to save it as 12 enough. And then you would want to turn this in for your chapter 12. Okay? And we're done. Part 2 of this, I'll do the screencast this weekend, and we'll look at the inner joins. And you'll see what I'm talking about as we start to join tables up. And once we begin to join tables with their various data and sets of data, etc., then we really start to grab that big data that you're going to hear people talking so much about. Folks, thank you so much. Bless you. Anybody have a question? Okay. All right. Thank you much. Have a good one. I'll see you next week. And be looking for part 2.